I saw my husband at Phoenix Sky Harbor with his hand on Samantha Pierce's lower back. And the touch was not what made me stop. It was the boarding pass in her hand, printed under Canyon Table Room's executive companion access, the profile that had carried my name for years. Parker Latham looked over his coffee, saw me near the premium lane, and did not move away from her. He leaned closer, close enough for me to hear. This trip needs someone who understands where we're going next. Samantha stood there in a camel coat, calm enough to make it feel rehearsed. A slim gray folder rested against her ribs, and the label on the spine read, Partner Conduct Memo. I looked from the folder to the luggage tag around her carry-on, where my companion status sat beneath her name. This was not my husband taking his mistress to Las Vegas for a private dining conference. This was him letting her walk through a door built from my approvals, my licenses, and every safeguard he used to mock. Parker's mouth tightened when I stepped closer, but his voice stayed soft. "Daphne, don't make this harder than it has to be," he said, while Samantha held that folder tighter. A gate agent glanced at the pass, then at me, and the shape of the trap became clear. Parker wanted a shaking wife in public, something he could carry into Las Vegas as proof that I had become the problem. I did not cry, and I did not ask Samantha how long she had been sleeping with my husband. I walked to the glass wall facing runway and called Marjorie Klein, the one person who knew our operating records better than Parker pretended to. Check the companion access, the lounge pass, the Las Vegas packet, and every credential changed last night, I said, watching Parker beside the woman wearing my place. When Marjorie went quiet, I knew this morning had stopped being about an affair and started becoming about evidence. Marjorie called back before Parker finished pretending I was the problem. Her voice stayed flat, the way it always did when a record had answered the question. The executive companion access had not glitched, and it had not been misread by a gate agent moving the line. It had been changed late the night before from spouse-partner access to invited leadership guest, and Samantha Pierce's name sat where mine had been. The change carried more than a seat beside my husband. It carried premium lounge access, hotel suite clearance, private reception entry, guest list preview, and a place inside the Las Vegas meeting packet I had not approved. I looked through the glass reflection and saw Parker still standing close to Samantha, his shoulders squared like confidence could outrun a timestamp. "Daphne, whatever you're doing, stop," he called softly, but the softness was for the people around us. He needed witnesses to hear concern, not fear. I told Marjorie to suspend only the personal executive privileges tied to Parker and Samantha, then repeated it before she could ask. The kitchen lead still flew. The floor manager still flew. The event coordinator still flew. And every employee with actual work in Las Vegas kept their hotel and transport. Nothing operational stopped because Parker had brought his private life into a company profile. What stopped was the luxury he had mistaken for ownership. A tablet chimed at the premium counter, and the gate agent's polite face changed just enough for me to see it. She glanced at Parker, then at Samantha's pass, and asked them both to step aside for an access review. Parker's mouth tightened in the small way it did when a room stopped obeying him. Samantha pulled the gray folder closer, and that movement made it look less like paperwork and more like evidence. Parker turned toward me with a warning in his eyes, but the line had already shifted around him. My staff kept boarding while my husband and his mistress stayed under the lights, separated from the power they had tried to wear as a couple. I took a table at the far end of the terminal cafe because Parker still needed me visible enough to blame. If I stayed at the counter, every breath could become a scene, and I had just watched him try to build one. My coffee sat untouched while Marjorie's secure message opened on my phone. Temporary guest relations credential created under Parker Latham. Linked to Samantha Pierce. Las Vegas packet accessed. The words did not shake me as much as the title beneath them. Partner Conduct Memo. Draft prepared for board review. The first line was clean enough to sound responsible. which made it uglier. Canyon table rooms should prepare leadership continuity if Daphne Hartwell's personal conflict disrupts executive judgment. I read it twice, then looked through the glass at Samantha holding that folder. Parker's text arrived first, because he always reached for guilt before truth. "You are turning our marriage into a company problem." I stared at the sentence, then at the premium counter where he stood beside the woman using my access. Samantha's message followed 1 minute later, softer and worse. "Parker deserves to lead without being managed by fear." That was when the whole morning locked into place. Parker had brought her to the airport so I would break in public. And Samantha had brought the memo so my breaking could be filed as proof. If I did nothing, they would board without me and walk into Las Vegas as the calm new leadership. If I stopped everything, they would call me reckless before lunch. I forwarded both messages to Marjorie, then called her with my voice low enough for the cafe noise to cover it. Preserve the timing, the access history, every draft edit, and every name attached to that packet. I told her, my hand steady around a cup I had not tasted. Marjorie did not ask if I was sure. She only answered, "No cleanup, no corrections, no deletions." I stood and left the coffee behind. Parker turned when he saw me coming, and Samantha's fingers tightened again around the folder. They still thought this was about the affair. I was walking back to confirm the paper trail. I reached the premium counter while Parker was telling the gate agent the system had misunderstood a routine change. Samantha stood beside him with the gray folder pressed against her coat, and the last premium passengers were already moving toward the jet bridge. I did not ask Parker whether he loved her, because the boarding pass had answered the only question that mattered. I looked at Samantha and kept my voice even. "Is that the partner conduct memo tied to the Las Vegas packet?" Parker moved before she could answer, stepping half a pace in front of her like husband, boss, and shield all at once. "You don't get to inspect internal documents in an airport," he warned, loud enough for strangers to hear concern instead of panic. I kept my eyes on the folder, not on his face. "I'm not asking to read confidential contents. I'm confirming possession of a memo created through an unauthorized credential and tied to my operating authority." The gate agent's posture changed when she heard unauthorized credential, and the supervisor beside her stopped treating this like a travel issue. Samantha's fingers slid over the folder spine, exposing the printed label for half a second. "Partner Conduct Memo. Las Vegas Leadership Continuity." Samantha lifted her chin and said, "It's just language for a difficult transition." But Parker glanced at her too fast, because she had said more than he wanted said. I took out my phone and photographed only the cover, the label, and Samantha's hand holding it, then lowered it before anyone could accuse me of touching company material. The supervisor checked his tablet again, and this time his voice sounded official. Parker Latham and Samantha Pierce could not board under the executive profile, while the companion access and meeting packet were under review. Behind them, my staff kept walking onto the plane, carrying real work to Las Vegas, while Parker stood under the terminal lights and Samantha held the folder like something already losing its weight in her hands, or harmless to anyone watching by then, in front of strangers who understood enough. Parker caught up to me near the glass wall, close enough that his reflection stood beside mine before I let him have my face. His voice dropped into the tone he used when a table needed calming. "You always do this. Daphne, you make every room remember the company stands because you say yes." I looked past him at Samantha, holding the folder, and the old hurt had a shape. I did not answer with history he could soften later. I answered with the things he had signed and forgotten. The nights I stayed after closing to check the license binder. The corrective plan I filed when he wanted one more private bar open past the allowed hour. The vendor hold I refused to rush because one bad service could have cost more than pride. Parker's jaw tightened, because those were not feelings. They were records with his initials beside mine. "That is control," he said. almost under his breath. Samantha stepped closer before I could answer, her voice smooth enough to sound kind. He needs someone who believes in him, not someone measuring every risk like he's a child. The word risk landed exactly where Parker had thrown it at me for years, and I knew then how much of our marriage he had poured into her ear. I turned to Samantha, not as the woman he chose, but as the woman repeating his excuses in better clothes. "You do not love the truth about Parker," I said, while her fingers tightened around the memo. "You love the version of him that never needed saving." Parker flinched harder at that than at anything I had said about the pass. He tried to call it a mistake, but I counted what stood in front of us: companion access, temporary credential, memo, Las Vegas packet, board language. "A mistake forgets a call," I told him. This took planning. For 1 second, the airport noise moved around us instead of through us. Parker looked wounded, but not innocent, and Samantha looked younger with the folder pressed to her coat. I called Marjorie again and asked her to check who else had been copied or attached to the partner conduct memo, because paper like that was never prepared for 2 people. Marjorie called back while Parker was still staring at the folder as if it might forgive him. I answered before the second ring, and her first words changed the temperature of the terminal. Clay Latham was attached to the packet, not copied by accident, attached to an operator independence note sent to Diana Westbrook and 2 board members. For a second, Parker stopped breathing the way guilty men do when a private plan is named in public. Clay was his younger brother, our vendor relations lead in Scottsdale, the one who called my license checks Daphne's weather reports because he hated anything that slowed his handshakes. Marjorie read the note in pieces, every phrase polished until it sounded harmless. Marital disruption may affect judgment. Reduced dependence on Daphne Hartwell. Temporary adjustment of guest access and private dining approvals. I looked at Parker, then at Samantha, and the morning finally showed its full shape. Parker had staged the wound at the gate. Samantha had carried the language, and Clay had opened a board door before I entered the room. If I cried, Clay's note would look careful. If I vanished, Parker and Samantha would arrive in Las Vegas looking steady without me. Activate the protective review clause, I told Marjorie, and Parker's face changed before she answered. He knew that clause because he had signed the operating policy beside me. Only discretionary executive travel, companion access, draft statements, temporary credentials, and proposed changes to my approval authority. I added, payroll stays untouched. Staff travel stays untouched. Dining commitments stay untouched. Parker stepped closer, his voice tight. You are freezing the company because you're angry. I kept the phone between us and watched Samantha lower the folder by 1 inch. No, I'm freezing the parts you used to make anger look like evidence. Marjorie's keyboard moved on the line. Then Diana Westbrook's name appeared in a forwarded notice. Diana called within minutes, and her voice carried no sympathy. Only wait. Send me logs, not feelings, she said. And I did. By the time Parker checked his phone, his authority at the Las Vegas reception was paused. Samantha's guest relations access was suspended, and Clay Latham had been placed under conflict review. The notice landed on Parker's phone while the Las Vegas flight board blinked toward final. He read it twice, and the color left his face in a way no apology could hide. Executive representation paused. Discretionary access suspended. Records preserved. Operations protected. Samantha saw the words over his shoulder, and for the first time that morning, she looked less like his future and more like someone beside a locked door. She opened her phone with a shaking thumb and tried her Canyon Table Room's email. Access suspended. She tried the guest list preview for the Las Vegas private dinner, the one she had expected to enter beside my husband, and the same message returned. The gray folder sagged in her hands because, without the portal, the calendar, and the company voice behind it. Paper was just paper. Parker stared at her screen like the system had betrayed him instead of telling the truth. My phone rang, and Diana Westbrook did not waste breath. "Your staff is boarding. The Las Vegas dinners remain active, and guests will not be affected," she said. "Only the companion access, the memo chain, and the Latham note are under review." I watched Parker understand the worst part. The company was still moving without him. Clay's text flashed across Parker's screen before he could hide it. What did Diana get? Then nothing. Because Diana's notice reached him too, preserving every vendor communication tied to his operator independence note. Parker looked at me as if I had struck first, but the evidence had been sitting in their own hands. Accounts. And timing. He stepped closer and whispered, "You got what you wanted." "No," I answered, keeping my voice low enough that he had to listen. "I did what you used to need me to do. I kept the company away from a bad decision dressed up as confidence." Samantha lowered herself into a seat, the memo resting on her lap like dead weight. Parker's mouth opened, but no clean version of the morning was left for him to say. Outside the glass, the jet bridge door closed behind the staff who had actual work to do. Parker stayed under the terminal lights with no lounge, no reception, no authority to borrow, and no woman beside him who could still make him look powerful. I picked up my bag and stepped toward the exit. I was still hurt, but I was no longer standing where he had placed me. 3 months later, I signed the divorce papers in a quiet office in downtown Phoenix, with Parker sitting across from me like a man waiting for a door to reopen. It did not. My signature had saved him more times than he ever admitted, but that morning it saved only me. After the review, Parker left his leadership role for misusing company privileges and hiding conflicts. Samantha Pierce disappeared from Canyon table rooms after her access history showed exactly what she had used the guest system to support. And Clay Latham was removed from vendor relations after Diana Westbrook traced his note back through the same packet. Diana kept the company steady. Marjorie took over clearer compliance oversight. And the Las Vegas dinners went on without the people who had tried to turn my pain into procedure. I moved into a bright condo near Tempe Town Lake, where mornings came without Parker's messages, Samantha's name, or a boarding pass that made me feel erased. For the first time in years, my name stood by itself, and it was enough. Sometimes peace begins when you stop asking someone to see your worth after they used it, spent it, and still called it control. Tell me honestly, would you have stayed calm at that gate? Or walked away much sooner?